Welcome students. In our last class, we discussed about the absorption of water. So, root hairs absorb the water either actively or passively. Now, the ascent of sap, that is, the root hair absorb the water and now the water is in the xylem. Okay, now the water is in the xylem tissues. From the xylem tissues, the water want to be transported upwardly. The water want to be transported upwardly and reaches the different parts of the plants. The water within the xylem is called sap. So, sap means water within xylem. So, water within the xylem is called sap, whereas the upward movement of water through xylem is ascent of sap. Ascent of sap means the upward movement. Upward movement of water within xylem. Okay. So, sap means water within the xylem is sap, whereas upward movement of water within xylem is ascent of sap. The path of ascent of sap, okay, we know through xylem. Xylem is the conducting tissue. Xylem is the conducting tissue. Xylem is the conducting tissue. Xylem contains vessels and tracheids. Xylem contains vessels and tracheids. The end wall of vessels are broken, so it look like a long tube. So tracheids are having tapering ends, presence of pits. So through these pits, the water are transported. So xylem is the water conducting tissue. Xylem is the water conducting tissue. Okay. So through xylem, the water is conducting. So a force is required to lift the water to the top of all trees. So a force is required for the upward movement. So for this upward movement, a force is required. Okay. So there are several theories are proposed by several scientists regarding the mechanism of ascent of sap. Okay, there are several theories are proposed by several scientists according to the mechanism of ascent of sap. First theory is vital force theory. So, vital force theory. The first theory is vital force theory. In this theory, what it says that living cells are mandatory for the conduction of water. Living cells are mandatory for the conduction of water. In this vital force theory, there is two theories, real pump theory and pulsation theory. Real pump theory and pulsation theory. Okay. So, relay pump theory and pulsation theory. So, in relay pump theory, it is proposed by Godlewski. It is proposed by the scientist. Whereas the pulsation theory is proposed by Lacy Bose. So in relay pump theory, what it says that the periodic change in osmotic pressure of living cell of xylem, the periodic changes in the osmotic pressure of living cell of the xylem parenchyma and medullary ray act as a pump for the movement of water. So the change in the osmotic pressure of living cells. It says like the change in the osmotic pressure of living cells of parenchyma. Living cells of xylem parenchyma. So xylem is a dead tissue. So the only living tissue is xylem parenchyma and medullary cells or medullary rays. Okay, so the change in or the periodic change in the osmotic pressure of living cell of xylem parenchyma and medullary may leads to the action or leads to act as a pump for the movement of water. Then J.C. Bose, what he done is he invented a apparatus called cruscograph. Cruscograph. It has a galvanometer and an electric probe. So J.C. Bose invented a instrument called cruscograph. It contains electric probe and a galvanometer. When the probe inserted into the inner cortex, the galvanometer gives high electricity. So when we insert that electric probe into the inner cortex, the galvanometer gives high electricity. So he said that rhythmic pulsating movement of inner cortex like a pump is responsible for ascent of sap. So the pulsating movement of inner cortex is responsible for the movement of water. So pulsating movement of inner cortex is responsible for the movement of water. Okay. So, the cells which is associated with the xylem, they exhibit a pumping action and the pumps the sap laterally into xylem vessels. So, the pulsating movement of inner cortex is responsible for the movement or responsible for ascent of sap, and the cells which is associated with the xylem may exhibit a pumping action and it leads to pumps the sap laterally into xylem cells. Okay, so these are the two theories regarding vital force theory. So what is vital force theory? Said that living cells are mandatory for the ascent of sap, and in relay pump theory, what Goldleski said that the change in or the periodic change in the osmotic pressure of living cells of xylem parenchyma and medullary rays may act as a pump for the movement of water. Whereas J.C. Bose said in the pulsation theory, he invented an instrument called cruscograph. It contained galvanometer and an electric probe, and these electric probe is inserted into the inner cortex. There it develops a high electricity. So the rhythmic pulsating movement of inner cortex may act as a pump, and it results in the action, or it results in the movement of water for ascent of sap. And the cells associated with the xylem may exhibit a pumping action, and these pumps the sap laterally into the xylem cells. Okay, so these are about the vital force theory, and the objections regarding vital force theories are living cells are not mandatory for ascent of sap. Okay, so Strager and Overton, two scientists, they made an experiment. What the experiment means, they placed the balsam plant in a solution containing picric acid. Okay, they cut it and they cut it and they placed it or immersed in the picric acid, subjected to excessive heat killed all the living cells of the trunk. Okay, so then the trunk may dip into water and ascent of sap took place. So what Stranger and Overton done, what they done is they take an tree trunk, old tree trunk, and they heat killed using picric acid. They heat killed the living cells, and the trunk when dipped in water, the ascent of sap takes place. Then second objection is the pumping action of living cells should be in between two xylem elements, that is vertically. The pumping action is always vertically, not on lateral sides. Okay, not on lateral sides. So these are about the vital force theory. Now root pressure theory. Second theory regarding the mechanism of ascent of sap is root pressure theory. Okay, root pressure theory. So, root pressure theory, what it says that a pressure developed in the trachary elements of the xylem as a result of metabolic activity of the root. Example, if we take a plant and we water well and we cut a few inches above the ground level, sap exudes out with some force. This is called sap exudation or bleeding. Okay. Sap exudation or bleeding. So, root pressure. The scientist is talking, he defined the root pressure as a pressure which developed in the trachary elements. Trachary elements means xylem tracheids or xylem vessel as a result of metabolic activities of root. So, pressure developed in the xylem as a result of the metabolic activity of root. So, okay, this is root pressure. But there are certain objections regarding the root pressure theory. First one, the root pressure is totally absent in the gymnosperms, which include some of the tallest plants. So, root pressure is totally absent in gymnosperm. The second one, there is no relationship between the ascent of sap and root pressure. So, second objection is there is no relationship between the ascent of sap and root pressure. For example, in summertime, the rate of ascent sap is more because due to transpiration, in spite of the fact that root pressure is very low. On the other hand, in winter, when the rate of ascent of sap is low, a high root pressure is formed. So, there is no relationship between ascent of sap and root pressure. And the third objection is the ascent of sap continues even in the absence of root. If we cut the root, even though the ascent of sap continues, then the magnitude of root pressure is about 2 atmosphere, which can raise the water level up to few feet only, whereas the tallest trees are more than 100-meter high. Okay, so the magnitude of root pressure is very low compared to the height of the trees. So these are the objections. So what root pressure theory said? Root pressure theory said that there is a pressure which exerts or develops in the trachary elements due to the metabolic activity of root. This pressure is the reason for the mechanism of ascent of sap. So certain objections are root pressure is totally absent in gymnosperm and there is no relationship between the ascent of sap and root pressure. Then the ascent of sap continues even if the root are absent. then the magnitude of root pressure is about 2 atmosphere. Okay, so it can't be raise the water level for the high length trees. So these are the objections of root pressure theory. Now, physical force theories. Physical force theory. Physical force theory suggests that the ascent of sand takes place through the dead xylem vessel and the mechanism is entirely physical and living cells are not involved. So, what are the points of physical force theory? This is that the ascent of sand takes place through dead xylem vessels. So, there is no need of living cells. So, ascent of cells are through dead xylem vessels. So there is no need of living cells and the energy is physical. So physical force of energy is required for the ascent of sand. And the physical force theory are of 3 types. First one, capillary theory. Okay, capillary theory. Capillary theory was proposed by the scientist Boyer. What he says that the xylem vessels which work like a capillary tube. So the xylem vessels which work like a capillary tube. So the capillarity of the vessels under normal atmospheric pressure is responsible for the ascent of sand. So the xylem vessels act like a capillary tube. These capillary or this capillarity of the vessels are responsible for the ascent of sand. But the theory was rejected by certain scientists because the magnitude of capillary force can be raised the water level up to a certain height. So, further the xylem vessels are broader than the trachea which actually conduct more water and which is against the capillary theory. So, the objections for the theory was rejected because the magnitude of capillary force can raise the water level up to a certain height. Further, the xylem vessels are broader than the trachea which actually conduct more water. So, which is against the capillary theory. Okay. Then, the second theory is Imbibation Theory. Second is Imbibation Theory. Imbibation Theory. In Imbibation Theory, what they say is that the theory was proposed by the scientist Unger and which is supported by the scientist Sack. The theory said that the water is imbibed through cell wall materials and not by the lumen. So, imbibition theory said that the water is absorbed by the cell wall material, not by the lumen. But the theory was rejected. Why? Because based on the ringing experiment which provided that water moves through the lumen of the cell wall and not by the lumen of the cell, not by the cell wall. So, imbibition theory said that the water moves through the cell wall, not through the lumen. But it is rejected. Why? Because as a result of ringing experiment which provide that water moves through the lumen of the cell and not by the cell wall. Then the third one is cohesion tension or cohesion transpiration pulled theory. Cohesion transpiration pulled theory. Cohesion transpiration pulled theory. This theory states that, which is proposed by diagonal and Joule. So this theory is based on three features. First one, strong cohesive force of water. Okay, strong cohesive force of water. So adjacent water molecules have high attractive in nature. When water molecules have this strong mutual force of attraction, those attractions are called cohesive force, which is due to they can't be easily separated from one another. So cohesive force means adjacent molecules have high force of attraction, and those water molecules have attract with the wall of xylem element. So water molecule have attraction with the wall of xylem elements. So such force of attraction are adhesion. So cohesive means between the water molecules, adhesion means between water molecule and the wall of xylem. These cohesive and adhesive forces work together to form an unbroken continuous water column in the xylem. So these cohesive and adhesive forces which work together, cohesive and adhesive forces work together to form an unbroken continuous water column in the xylem. So the magnitude of cohesive force is much high and is more than enough to the transport of ascent of sap in the tallest trees. Okay, so the magnitude of cohesive force is much high. So this magnitude is okay for the transport of ascent of sap. Now, continuity of water column in the plant. Second one is continuity of water column. Continuity of water column. Actually, an important factor which can break the water column is gas molecule or gas bubbles. The gas bubble expanding and displacing water within the xylem element is called cavitation or embolism. So the gas molecules displacing and expanding within the xylem element is called as cavitation or embolism. However, the overall continuity of the water column remains undisturbed since water diffuses into the adjacent xylem elements for the continuing of ascent of sap. Then the third one is transpiration pulled. So the third is transpiration pulled. So what transpiration pulled said that the unbroken water column from leaf to root is just like a rope. So the unbroken water column from the root to leaf is like a rope. So if the rope is pulled from the top, the entire rope will move upward. Okay, so the unbroken water column or unbroken xylem is like a rope. If we pull the rope from the top, the entire rope will move upwards. Like that, in plants, such a pull is generated by the process called transpiration. Such pull is called transpiration pull. The water vapor which evaporates from mesophyll cells to the intercellular spaces near stomata as a result of active transpiration. So, when active transpiration takes place, the water vapor evaporates from the mesophyll cells to the intercellular spaces. So, from these intercellular spaces, through stomata, the water vapor goes to the atmosphere. The water vapor are then transpired through the stomata pores. Okay. Then loss of water from mesophil cells causes a decrease in water potential. So water moves as a pull from cell to cell along the water potential. So into the mesophil cells, from the neighboring cells, water entered into the mesophil cells as a result of decrease in water potential. The water may move from higher water potential to lower water potential. This tension is generated at the top of the unbroken water column. So this transpiration may take place in the leaf. So as a result, this tension may generated in the tip of the leaf or at the top of the unbroken water column. So transmitted, and this tension may transmitted downwards from petiole through stem and finally reaches the root. So as a result of transpiration, a tension may generated. This tension may moves from upwards till the roots. The cohesion theory is the most accepted. The cohesion theory is the most accepted theory in plant physiology today. So for the ascent of sap, the cohesion theory is the most accepted theories. So what are the three physical theories? First one is capillary theory, Imbibation theory and cohesion theory. Capillary theory said that the xylem vessels act as a capillary and tube. So this capillarity is responsible for the movement of ascent of sap. Whereas in Imbibation theory, that is the cell wall materials are imbibed. That is, this cell wall is absorb the water, not the lumen, or the cell wall is responsible for the transport, not through the lumen. Those theory also rejected. Finally, cohesion transpiration pulled. First one, strong cohesive force. Strong cohesive force means the water molecules, in between two water molecules, there is a strong force of attraction that is called cohesive, and the attraction between the water molecules at the wall of xylem vessels are called adhesive. So, this cohesive adhesive force will make the continuity or continuous water column, unbroken water column. Then the continuity of the water column in the plant. So this continuity of water column may be break due to the presence of gaseous or gas bubbles. So such process is called cavitation or embolism. Then transpiration pull. When transpiration occur in the leaf, it generates a decrease in the water potential of the mesophil cells. So water from the neighboring cells may enter into the mesophil cells. This tension may moves from the leaf to petiole and from petiole to stem, finally it reaches the roots. So root absorbs water from the soil. So the widely accepted theory is cohesion transpiration or cohesion theory. Okay, so these are about ascent of sap. So ascent of sap means sap which is found in the xylem is the water which is found in the xylem is sap, and sap within the upward movement of water within the xylem is ascent of sap. And there are several mechanisms for the ascent of sap, and several theories are proposed by several scientists regarding what ascent of sap. First one is vital force theory. Then it contains real pump theory and pulsation theory. Real pump theory said that there is a arithmetic or periodic changes in the osmotic pressure of living cells of xylem, parenchyma and medullary plates. And the pulsation theory, J.C. Bose proposed or he find out a instrument called cruscograph, and the rhythmatic pulsating movement of inner cortex like a pump is responsible for the movement of ascent of sap or movement of sap. Second theory is a root pressure theory. So there is a pressure which is developed in these xylem vessels or tertiary elements as a result of metabolic activity of root. So this pressure is responsible for the movement of ascent of sap. Now the physical force theory. Physical force theory said that the cell sap or the ascent of sap is occur through the dead xylem vessels, and the mechanism is entirely physical. There is no involvement of living cells. In the physical force theory, there are three: capillary, imbibition and cohesion, transpiration, pull. Okay, so these are about the movement of sap, that is the upward movement of sap in the plant cell or plants. So these are about today's class. So tomorrow we can discuss, or in our next class we can discuss about what is transpiration and different types of transpiration and the mechanism of transpiration. Okay. So these are about today.